pass of Thermopylae, a small Greek force led by 300 Spartans held up the enormous Persian army for 3 days before they were finally encircled and killed. Then, in the Straits of Salamis, the Greek fleet defeated the Persian navy. But they couldn't prevent the Persians burning the sacred temples of the Athenian Acropolis. The next year at Plataea, the Greeks won a decisive land battle against the Persians and forced them to abandon their invasion.
That's not that bad.
The next 50 years were the golden age of classical Greece. But rising tension between Athens and Sparta and their allies eventually led to war, dragging the Greek world into decades of destructive fighting. Wars between the Greek city-states continued for almost a century, leaving them exhausted and vulnerable to a new rising power to the north. For centuries, sophisticated Greeks had viewed the mountainous kingdom of Macedonia as a backwater, exfil, barely Greek at all. But under King Philip II, Macedonia emerged as a formidable military force. His most famous reform? The introduction of the sarissa, an 18-foot pike, twice the length of a normal Greek spear, and wielded by trained infantry fighting in close formation known as a phalanx. In 338 BC, at the Battle of Chaeronea, Philip's army crushed the joint forces of Thebes and Athens. Through alliance and conquest, Philip had already gained control over most of his neighbors. Now, following this victory, he united all Greece in an alliance known as the Hellenic League, or League of Corinth, with Philip as hegemon, or supreme commander. Only Sparta stood aside. Philip began to plan a great campaign, a pan-Hellenic or all-Greek war against the Persian Empire. Their old foe was now an ailing superpower, its great riches ripe for the taking. But on the eve of launching his war, Philip was assassinated by his own bodyguard, victim of Macedonia's brutal court rivalries. He was succeeded by his 20-year-old son, Alexander, brilliant, restless, tutored by the great philosopher Aristotle, and already an experienced military commander. Alexander inherited his father's grand plan to invade Persia, but first he had to secure his own position as king. At home, he had potential rivals executed, then crushed rebellions in Illyria, Thessaly, and central Greece. He made a special example of Thebes, completely destroying the ancient city and selling its people into slavery. In the spring of 334 BC, now ready to launch his war against the Persian Empire, Alexander led his army across the Hellespont into Asia Minor. It was the start of one of the greatest military campaigns in history. Alexander's army was about 40,000 strong, drawn from all parts of Greece. The infantry were commanded by the veteran Macedonian general Pompeius. In the front rank, 9,000 Macedonian phalangites, armed with the 18-foot sarissa. These were professional soldiers, well-trained and drilled, who formed up for battle in the phalanx, 16 ranks deep. This packed formation presented a solid wall of iron spear tips and was virtually unstoppable. But it was also difficult to maneuver, and high highly vulnerable to attacks on its flanks or rear. So 3,000 elite infantry, the hypaspists, or shield bearers, armed with shorter spears, guarded its flanks. They were commanded by Parmenion's son, Nicanor. The second line of Alexander's army was made up of 7,000 Greek allies and 5,000 mercenaries, armed as
That's just regular History Channel. But you can get a lot of off of YouTube, a lot of the History Channel
their
stuff.
large round
So if I
shields
did,
and
so if I
carried
did,
shorter 8-foot spears.
Kings and Generals,
Epic History.
Epic History TV,
The hoplite
or
phalanx
History
was
Channel.
not as effective as
Because
the
sometimes
Macedonian
I'll watch
phalangites,
things that are on the
but still well armed and heavily armored for the
like
time.
Dish Network.
Like BBC type stuff. Or
No, it's
The Agrianes were the army's elite skirmishers,
videos.
expert javelin throwers from what's now southern
My
Bulgaria.
regular TV.
Other skirmishers from Thrace and Illyria were armed with javelins, slings, and bows.
Where is that? Dish Network. Dish Network. No.
probably Dish. Dish is
Shock
one of your main
troops
TV
of
providers.
Alexander's
Dish, that would
army
be that.
were the
Dish is Dish
Tibetan
Network.
cavalry.
The other one is,
Slate TV
1,800
or something
elite
like that
horsemen,
maybe, or like
armed
one
with
of those
spear
streaming
and
services
sword.
that
yeah,
helps
but
you.
Commanded
I would
by
have to have
Philotas.
internet too.
Hey.
Another son of
If I don't
Parmenion.
finish
So
the
I
what?
just get
If what happens? Well, what would happen if I? What happens if I don't finish the second
If you
turn?
don't get a second, just get as far as you can, okay? And then we'll look at how far you got at the end of the class period. If you're far enough on it, then I'll just count it, and you can finish them over
And 900
break or
mounted
over
scouts
next week,
from
okay?
Thrace
And I'll just
and
give you all the
Ionia
points now.
under Cassandra.
Yeah.
So just work as hard as you can on it, get as many done as you can, and then we'll take a look at it, okay?
Alright. I doubt that I'm gonna do this.
Well, we can always wait even until you get back, okay? Just as long as you're gonna get it done, okay? So get as far as you can today,
The
alright?
great
Yeah.
Persian
Which might even be
was
done. If you
divided
keep
into
working on it, you
provinces.
might get done with it.
Yeah.
Okay? So just keep working on it, and we'll take a look at it when we're at the end of the class period, okay?
Okay.
Satrap.
Netflix is over. I just get the actual disc because
Those
Yeah,
invasions
I have
now
unlimited
threatened by Alexander's invasion met to discuss strategy.
my devices, but
Memnon of Rhodes, a skilled Greek general in Persian service, urged them to avoid battle with Alexander.
for free.
Oh, yeah.
Instead,
Those are
he
all-
advised them to use a scorched earth strategy
So I
to burn
we were already
villages
doing
and crops
Netflix movies
and withdraw
before
to
that,
the
but,
interior. Alexander's army, he promised, would quickly
So my
starve.
daughter has Netflix streaming in Palmer.
It was good advice, but the satraps were unwilling to lay waste to their own provinces without a fight.
We already had Wi-Fi. But you have to have that.
Thank you, The Walking Dead.
You have to have it for their Xbox. And so since I already have unlimited data.
So they decided to face Alexander's army at the river Granicus. The Persian army formed up behind the river, which was shallow but 60 feet wide with steep banks. Their front line was a wall of cavalry, about 10,000 horsemen from across the empire. Medes and Hyrcanians from modern Iran, Bactrians from Afghanistan, and Paphlagonians from Turkey's Black Sea coast. Behind, in reserve, were the infantry, several thousand Greek mercenaries, a common sight in Persian armies at this time. These men fought for Persian gold and were armed with the round shield and short spear of hoplites. The Persians may have been unsure if they could trust these men in combat against fellow Greeks, and so placed them at the rear. Alexander, determined to attack and destroy this Persian force before it could retreat, raced to the Granicus with his best troops. On his left wing he posted Thessalian, Greek and Thracian cavalry under Parmenion's command. In the center were the massed spears of the phalanx, its 6 divisions commanded by Perdiccas, Koinos, Amintas, Philip, Meleager, and Craterus. On the right, Alexander himself with the companion cavalry under Philotas, as well as the elite Hypaspists, the Agrianes javelin throwers, and the archers. Alexander, with 13,000 infantry and 5,000 cavalry in all, was probably slightly outnumbered. But ignoring advice to wait until dawn to cross the river, he ordered an immediate assault. He sent a squadron of companion cavalry to ford the river, followed by a regiment of hypaspists and the Paeonian light cavalry. Alexander, calling on his men to show their courage, then led his right wing across the river. As they reached the middle of the river, the Greeks came under a hail of javelins, darts, and arrows from the Persian line. Those that made it to the far bank were immediately charged by the Persian cavalry. Alexander was in the thick of the fighting. He attacked where the whole mass of their cavalry and leaders were stationed.
History.
Around him, a desperate conflict raged. Horses were jammed against horses, and men against men. The Macedonians striving to drive the Persians away from the riverbank. The Persians determined to prevent them crossing, and to push them back into the river. Alexander's attack seemed reckless, but he was buying time for the rest of his army to cross the river, including the irresistible Macedonian phalanx. Then, suddenly, Alexander was fighting for his life, charged by two Persian nobles. Rhoesaces rode up to Alexander and struck him on the head with his sword, breaking off a piece of his helmet. But the helmet broke the force of the blow, and Alexander struck him down with his lance. Then, from behind, Mithridates raised his sword against the king, but Black Clitus, son of Dropidas, anticipated his blow, struck his arm, and cut it off, sword and all. Now the Greek army was across the river, and the Persian cavalry faced a wall of Macedonian spears. Most turned and fled. The speed and shock of Alexander's attack meant Persia's Greek mercenaries hadn't even had time to join the battle. Alexander, in a blood rage, or possibly regarding these Greeks as traitors, ignored their appeals for mercy. The mercenaries were surrounded on all sides and massacred. Alexander had won a great victory. Asia Minor now lay at his mercy. But the Persian Empire was still a land of immense wealth and power. Already, it was mobilizing its vast resources to face him. If Alexander was to conquer this empire and take his place in history, he'd next have to face Darius,
Oh my god.
King of Kings himself.
Name.
If you wear glasses or contacts, you must see this. An award-winning doctor reveals an astonishing, natural way to reclaim the 20/20 vision you were born with in
Now, as Alexander approached Sardis, capital of the Persian province of Lydia, its commander surrendered without a fight. But before Alexander could advance further, he needed to neutralize Persian naval power. Persia had a powerful fleet with major naval bases around the eastern Mediterranean
History.
that could potentially cut his lines of communication back to Greece. Rather than challenge the Persians at sea, Alexander decided to attack its nearest bases, the Greek coastal cities of Miletus and Halicarnassus.
Whoa, didn't mean to do
Both put
that.
up determined resistance, but were taken by winter. The following spring of 333 BC, Alexander continued his advance into Lycia and Phrygia. At Gordium, he was shown the legendary Gordian knot. A prophecy said that whoever could unpick it would rule all Asia. Alexander simply took his sword and sliced it in half.
I remember the concept of that idea, but nobody just cut it in half. I guess how I did it.
Meanwhile, Memnon of Rhodes, a skilled Greek general in Persian service, led Persian warships into the Aegean and captured the islands of Chios and Lesbos. But after Memnon's sudden death from illness, the offensive was abandoned. 18 months had passed since Alexander's army crossed the Hellespont and invaded the Persian Empire. Now Alexander led his men into Cilicia and was soon poised to cross the Nore Mountains into Syria. But then the main Persian army, led by King Darius III himself, emerged behind the Greek army to the north. Darius was determined to trap and destroy Alexander's army, which he outnumbered almost 2 to 1. So he blocked Alexander's only escape route by moving his army to the coastal plain near Issus, just 6 miles wide, from mountains to sea.
There are a lot of students who would not do that.
The narrow battlefield would force Alexander to fight, and also prevented Darius exploiting his huge numerical advantage.